Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Jan Philipp Albrecht. I'm a member of the European Parliament and rapporteur of the European Parliament for the General Data Protection Regulation and member of the European Parliament since 2009, just recently new elected.
My name is Cornelia Kutterer. I'm Digital Policy Director for Europe, Middle East and Africa for Microsoft. I'm based in Brussels.
My name is Jacob Applebaum, and I'm a developer with the Tor project, but I'm also an investigative journalist working here in Germany with Der Spiegel and other publications.
My name is Matthias Treimer. I'm working in the Austrian Federal Chancellery. I'm the director there for media law, policy, and information society.
Thank you.
My name is Ben Scott. I direct a program called European Digital Agenda here in Berlin at a think tank called Stiftung Neue Verantwortung. And I am also a senior advisor at the Open Technology Institute in Washington.
Thank you all very much, and thank you for making it to the session today and for accepting to be on the panel. I'm standing here on the stage. I would love to go down, but as I'm not that tall and I need to make some signs to the people in the back of the room so that they know what they are supposed to do at some moments during the session, I will be standing here. For those participants, for you in the room, there will be an opportunity to contribute to the session as well. We have created a wiki page for the session. The session is an ambitious one, focusing on trust and the way to bring trust back in the internet. So the questions that the panelists are going to address today are also questions that you yourselves could be answering. You just go online and edit, use the edit option and insert your answers. And you could also leave questions for the panelists so that we could either address them during the session if time allows, or we could take them further and address them as part of other fora related to internet governance. Very important details. The reporter for the session is Lee Hibbert, sitting right here on my right, and we have Sorina Telano, who is a remote moderator. With this, as I said, the main theme of the session is around trust, and more specifically, it is entitled "The Internet is Broken: Bringing Back Trust in the Internet." The nowadays paradox is that even if the world has become a much better place, with many governments aiming for more accountability and transparency, at the same time, we have been witnessing an unprecedented cases related to passing some restrictive laws, reducing and limiting civic space, and conducting massive surveillance. The arguments that this is needed to protect us and guarantee security are probably no longer relevant that much. And the questions, is it contributing to building really open societies, or why governments don't trust us, the citizens, why they are spying on us? As John Kerry said during an open government-related event in London at the end of last year, he said, yes, it all goes back to the Second World War, to the Cold War, to 9/11. Surveillance and massive data collection is there, but he really did acknowledge that this has reached beyond the limits. It has gone too far. So trust is something that is indeed a powerful tool. And today, more than ever, we really need to find ways to redress the situation. But how we do that? Probably the most important thing is to depart from the notion of trust. And before I go to the panelists, I would like to pick a couple of reflections from the people in the room. Can you hear me? No? Let me take another mic. I have another microphone. So before we move to the panelists, I would like to pick on some of your reflections. You in the room, what is trust for you? How do you define it? Oh, and I will just randomly pick any of you. The lady here, what is trust for you?
trust for me is that I'm not afraid to use some, I don't know, some sources, some information, you know, something like that.
Okay. Thank you very much. You are not afraid. Interesting. Gentlemen here, what's trust for you?
From my point of view, trust in the internet is broken, and so we have to take care what we are doing in the internet.
We have to take care about what we are doing on the internet. And lady here, what's trust for you?
Well, I'm from Finland, and there we have this big tendency to just trust each other very, very much. So I would say that trust is the basis of a functional society.
Okay, thank you very much. A renowned author who has been doing a lot of work on trust, called Stephen Covey, is the author of the famous book called Speed of Trust. And I want to share with you briefly some of the tips he is given when he addresses trust. The video, can we have the video?
So I often get asked, well, just give me the elevator pitch, the big ideas on your trust work, the speed of trust, smart trust. In a summary, what are the big ideas behind it? And I say, you know what? There's really three big ideas. The first big idea is that trust is an economic driver, not just a social virtue. In other words, there's a business case for trust, and it's a compelling case. The second point is that trust is the #1 competency of leadership needed today. It's the #1 competency of all the things we can do as a leader. To be trusted, to create trust, to inspire trust, to grow it, to extend it, is more important than anything else. If you get good at trust, it will make you better at everything else that you need to do. Your ability to collaborate goes up, to partner, to team goes up, to engage people goes up. Your ability to innovate, to attract people, to retain people goes up. Your ability to sell more goes up. People buy from those that they trust. They buy more frequently in larger amounts. They'll stay with you longer. They'll refer business to you. They'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and so forth. When there's low trust, just the opposite on all those fronts. So you get good at trust, it will make you better at everything else that you need to do. The third big idea is that trust is a learnable competency. It is something we can do, we can learn, we can master, we can move the needle on. The ability to create trust, the ability to create smart trust, the ability to do this with customers, with partners. And how do you do it? You do it through focusing on your credibility and focusing on behaviors that grow trust. Credibility and behavior is all about how you create trust. And so it's a learnable competency. And many people never thought of it that way. They thought of trust as something that you either have or that you don't have. It's either there or it's not there. Now that's your starting point. In the same way you can diminish trust, you can also consciously, deliberately grow it on purpose. And when we do those three things together, when we see the business case for trust, the leadership case for trust, but then the practical mechanics of how you build trust through your credibility and through your behavior, you will move the needle, you'll get better results, you'll get better business outcomes, and then you'll find yourself moving at an incredible speed. And I call it the speed of trust.
So we see, thank you to the person in the back. We see that trust is an economic driver, is a #1 competency of leadership that is needed today. It is a learnable competency, and this is all critical when it comes to the online space. I think these are critical elements for us to be able to manage and build an open, free, secure, and accessible internet for all. So I want to move to the panelists and to ask them to reflect and share their thoughts on what does trust mean for them, and how can we specifically bring back trust, especially in our European users, in order to restore the trust that has been lost. So can I ask each one of you to take turns, a couple of minutes to reflect on this aspect?
Okay, I would start and pass on the microphone. So for me, it's not about just a feeling of trust, but trust for most of us, first of all, is a working society in which I can trust on the application of the rules we decide together. That's democracy. And I think that, first of all, we need to restore trust in democracy and in the rule of law, and then we can talk about trust in the framework which we have in a democratic rule of law based society. So I don't think that trust can only be restored by just talking to each other or by just having nice advertisements or nice pictures. but trust is linked directly to the question if we respect the rules we give together in a democratic way.
Thank you.
So for me personally, trust it's not a feeling, it's experience based on patterns of behavior that has been shown before, and hence in the context of the broken internet, which is probably not the broken internet, for a company like Microsoft, that means that we will do everything we can to show our customers that we are bound by the rule of law, and we do everything to actually force everybody else to use the rule of law in their behavior. And what I mean by saying that is where governments try to access our data on transmission, we enforce through encryption them to go through legal procedures to get the data, and where the procedures are not according to the rule of law, we will challenge that. So these are two of those areas where we try to restore trust by also initiating dialogue between governments. That's one of the biggest challenges we still have. And also by going to look into our contractual assurances that we can give based on rule of law to our customers.
Thank you.
I think, trust, as Jan said, I think it really has a lot to do with democratic oversight, and it has a lot to do with the ground rules. I think, though, that we could say a few specific things. So one of them is a sort of preemptive freedom from suspicion. If, for example, we are treated as if we are not trustworthy, it is difficult to return trust. And that's actually a matter of reputation and a matter of a grounding. So if by default we assume that people are free, then it follows that we can trust them without treating them with suspicion. And so this is fundamentally about respecting basic human rights, which is sometimes in contradiction with laws. And I think that to that end, we have to consider that trust is really not something that we should just give freely, but should be earned. And so part of that is to look at the actions of governments and corporations and see where they promote transparency and accountability and honesty. And sort of there's a great quote from the 80s, trust but verify. And so anyone who isn't preemptively helping with that process really doesn't deserve our trust, they deserve our suspicion. And we should really be looking to see, not just for corporations that say, oh, we follow the rule of law, when we know that companies often operate, for example, in places with secret laws and secret interpretations of basic words, like the word relevant being redefined to mean anything in American law in secret. And so we should be looking for people that are actually looking and talking about doing what is morally correct as well as what is legal, and looking to preemptively change the laws, not when there's a clear business case, but when it would create a better world, and actually having that as the goal as opposed to just having profit as the goal. And so those are sort of, I think, a few things for a basis of trust, and then from there, it depends on trust in which context. So I think we can move on from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there have been said so many wise words about trust, meanwhile, that I all can share these ideas. I better tell you, I'm from Vienna, so the city of Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud already, maybe, he said that children are especially attached to those who give them nutrition or who they depend on physically. So it's all the mother's fault all the time. And one of his scholars, it was Erik Erikson, he said, no, it's not that. It's that the children in the first 1 or 2 years learn who they should trust in, who fulfill their wishes and desires in the best way. So we see it already. It has to do with a process, on the one hand, with a natural maybe human resource. On the other hand, also something we have to learn. We won't find the final answer here. What my role, I think, is, since I was invited as a government representative, unfortunately not from Ministry of the Interior, I'm not a member of Secret Service, or if I were, I wouldn't tell you. No, I'm dealing with human rights, and what for me is important when we talk about trust and also the role of the state is this concept of the European Court on Human Rights, which deals with the so-called positive obligations. What does it mean? Not to be too abstract. It means in the context of human rights, the state has not only the obligation to refrain from intervention, but to be really active in delivering, and as you said, the court in the DINK case, delivering an environment where you can act free of fear and where you can make full rights of especially freedom of speech. So it's maybe some kind of paradox. We speak about all that topic because the state acted in the way of surveillance, but what my message should be, the state should do, of course, not only the exact opposite, but what can the state do to build up trust? And I say my message is the state has an obligation to build up this trust, and how we can speak a little bit later. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then?
The benefit of being at the end of the panel is you get time to think about what you're going to say. I'll repeat something that has come up, I think, for every speaker, which is trust is deeply linked to law. And for me, it's about transparent law consistently applied. Or in other words, justice. But it's more than just law, because it's also a very human thing. It shapes how we act in the world. It's about the expectation that we have of one another in societies, about shared values that shape our behaviors. So what do I mean by that? I'll give you a non-internet based example. How many in the room are parents? Okay. For those of you who are not parents, you're going to have to use your imagination. If you are a parent, you know that on a sunny day like this, you go out with your kids in the stroller, and you get on the bus or you get on the subway, and you park the stroller in the place where the stroller gets parked, and the diaper bag is hanging over the stroller, but the kid doesn't want to sit in the stroller. The kid wants to sit in the back of the bus. Do you leave the stroller with the diaper bag parked in the middle of the bus and take the kids to the back of the bus? I always considered myself a trusting person, and I felt like I ought to be able to leave the diaper bag on the stroller. You know how many times it took for me to never do that again? One time the diaper bag was stolen, and now I can't trust anybody in any bus. The common expectation of shared values that shapes the behavior of bus riders has been violated for me to the point where it may be the rest of my life before I leave the diaper bag on the stroller again. The problem with the NSA affair is that everybody's diaper bag got stolen all at once. And now nobody wants to get on the bus. This is a fundamental social problem that, yes, the application of law transparently and consistently applied will help to rebuild trust, but fundamentally we have to reset how we think about our common expectations of one another in society.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for these valuable contributions. Indeed, projects like WikiLeaks and all of its copies and disclosures from NSA disclosed information on how governments and private organizations monitor and influence our everyday activity is indeed frustrating. We all know that every time we send an email, NSA could read it. Every time we text, call, chat, chat with someone, NSA could track it. Every site we visit, online services we use, NSA knows it. And here are some interesting statistics. I'm not sure people are aware of them. But just as an example, each day in 2011, the NSA was able to collect about 200 million SMS messages, 5 million missed call alerts for discovering someone's social network from whom they contact and when, 1.6 million border crossing a day, more than 110,000 names from electronic business cards, which also included the availability to extract and save images, over 800,000 financial transactions, either through text-to-text payments or linking credit cards to phone users, geolocation data from more than 7,600 text messages a day. These are incredible data. I mean, this is really something. And I remember, again, referring to the summit on open government, where governments were supposed to talk about the initiatives of how they are being open and accountable and respecting citizens and respecting the rule of law and so on and so forth. One of the government officials was really, and I remember it was someone from Europe, was very frustrated with the Google Street View program. He was saying that I'm very frustrated that my house at the beach is available in every single detail to anyone who has access to the internet. So even if we accept that today's technologies give us an added value and contribute to the increase of the quality of life, we should also look at the freedoms that are being taken away from us. And definitely it's not only US doing, my government is doing, your government is doing. The degree to which this is happening is different. It depends on the resources they have, on the skull behind, but still this is happening. And in line with this, I would like to address all of you on the panel with all this in the background, how to still ensure a proper balance between legitimate interests of the business and governments on one hand, and the rights and interest of internet users on the other hand. What's your view on this? How can we ensure balance? Is there any balance possible at all? So your thoughts on this? Mm-hmm. Or maybe we start from Ben. He was complaining he was the last one.
I wasn't complaining.
This is how I got.
So the question is, how do we get the balance back?
How to balance?
This is all about the transparent application of the rule of law. The problem is that the rule of law was not designed for the internet era. And we now have a very big job ahead of us, which is to modernize privacy policy for the digital age. And no country on earth has laws that are sufficient to the task. It is not just a job for the United States government, it's a job for every government. And we need to think about it in all of its facets and need to understand the pervasiveness of the internet in order to get a handle on all the different areas in which we need to be rethinking and resetting law in order to account for the power of technology and the ways in which people use it.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Matthias?
Thank you. First of all, yeah, I like very much what you say about it's all about the rule of law, and especially also the linkage that we have in the first round between what you said about trust and rule of law and democracy. I have to contradict you when you say rule of law was not formulated or whatever, constructed for the time of the internet or whatever. I think rule of law is a principle basis no matter if it's online or offline. And in principle we say that human rights that we have online are the same as we have offline. Of course we have specific situations we are going to discuss, but what my problem is that all kind of conferences like this, also EuroDIG, or be it also on the national or international level, it's always this general view of things. The problem is, of course, whenever you ask a lawyer and you want to know, well, do I get my money back or not? What is the answer? It depends. And this is, I mean, also the issue here. Of course, the courts say, both the Luxembourg Court and the Human Court on Human Rights so far, that if you do something in general without doing any distinction, for example, a general filtering, a general blocking obligation like we had in the Court of Justice. This is of course against human rights or the Charter on the EU, against the EU Charter. But in principle, we have a perfect system as such in theory, in academic theory. And this is, for example, the European Convention on Human Rights. And coming back to the problem that I wanted to express, we often speak here about terms, well, it is important that we guarantee safety, that we guarantee transparency, that we guarantee a fair balance. There are hundreds and hundreds of people working on standards, and not all these standards are that bad as there is often given the impression. For example, when you say, what should the state do, or where is the state responsibility? It's, for example, starting with network security. The European Union has been working lots of years, has founded an agency, the ENISA. There are directives, the NIS directive is actually discussed, and of course there are a lot of criticism also, but a lot of work has been done. The question of trust, I do not have to talk here about all these issues about data protection, about the whole e-commerce law, and especially also all these initiatives in the public partnerships. So a lot is going on, and that is often not mentioned in this general discussion. So I would also say the internet is broken with a question mark. Where is it broken in the way? Maybe a crime has happened there, that you say you did something against the law and you were spying on people without any legislative basis for that. But the internet, to my mind, is not broken. Everybody is addicted to it. Everybody is sitting here. It's terrible. Yeah, we all get up in the morning, the first thing we look at our mobiles. So it's not broken. We should, if we talk about it, speak about the concrete cases. And I said the internet is not broken. To my mind, the internet is not broken. The internet is not broken. We have, of course, individual problematic cases, and for example, if I give over to Jack, I think he can tell a lot of these problematic cases.
Am I the individual problematic case?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Matthias. And just a note, we will immediately, after the panelists will address this question, we will go to the audience, and you'll be able to formulate your specific questions or comments. So please bear with us. Yes, please.
So I have a couple of points to respond to you. One of them is this notion that everybody's doing it, and you mentioned your country, and my guess is that actually it is different. Like, your country probably doesn't design so-called lawful interception systems. You just get the trickle down from my country. So when we talk about what it is, we need to talk about it being sabotage. Not everyone is actually participating in sabotaging the internet and fundamental infrastructural, architectural things. In fact, for the most part, those standards have happened in Europe and in the United States, and mostly driven by the United States, specifically CALIA. So the notion that everybody's doing the spying also, the scale is really important to think about. When we talk about, dragnet surveillance, Sweden's FRA, their equivalent of the NSA, is doing dragnet surveillance. They are using quantum-related, like quantum hand, quantum insert, quantum cookie, these types of attacks, because the NSA and GCHQ are working together with them. And so the scale is the combined resources of the GCHQ sensors, the Swedish sensors, the American sensors deployed all over the world. So everybody is doing it. It's not clear, for example, that many of the people targeted by that or that even run those networks know that their machines are doing that. So many people are participating without their knowledge, but really everybody that's doing it is a small set of intelligence agencies acting in a criminal conspiracy across the planet. And I kind of don't feel like most of the people in this room are in on it. So everybody doing it is a misnomer. And to the point about the rule of law is not always the most important thing, because in some cases, people will argue that an executive order in the United States, even if has a classified annex, that it trumps constitutionally debated laws that are passed by Congress, and they would argue that it's legal. And so, I mean, what we have to look at is principles as well. So in the United States, we have a tradition against general warrants. And even if there is a law that says that it is legal, we must look at the constitutionality and the spirit of the foundation of our republic, not just at the legality of this thing. And what's clear is that there are a lot of people that did not consider the constitutionality, or they did and they thought what they were doing was more important. And they talk about this. And Justice Brandeis actually wrote nearly 100 years ago about this and essentially predicted that with the rise of mass surveillance. And he talked about the problems with the rule of law and specifically about issues relating to the spirit. And so when we ask what the balance is, as my final point, it's not a balance of states' abilities to wiretap me or to sabotage standards or to try to break cryptography or to attack people and my right to privacy. It is about the fact that states have positive and negative obligations that have something to do with transparency and accountability and democratic oversight, and they're not living up to those things. And my right to be left alone is something else entirely. That's a totally different topic. The fact of the matter is that a lot of these people, like General Alexander, are criminals, and they're committing criminal activities. When the NSA kills people with drone strike data in concert with the CIA, they are committing an assassination which is under international law illegal, and under American law it is illegal, and it is definitely immoral. So this surveillance issue is far beyond the internet, and it is absolutely critical that we recognize that that has nothing to do with the privacy of the people that are targeted. That has to do with due process and fundamental liberties.
Thank you. Wow. I'm saying the same thing that I wanted to say, but I think now it's even more important to say it is that I think the equation between governments and companies on one side and users and citizens on the other is not a correct one. You have governments, you have companies that hold data, and then you have users. And we have different relations to them. Some of the governments are our customers, but we also see them as someone that we have to defend our customers from when they are not acting according to the rule of law. And I would at least agree with you in so far as there is need for government reform in the United States, and Microsoft has been partnering with others in demanding these reforms. We have also sued the United States to allow us to be transparent about requests, and to a certain extent we can now at least tell parts of that. As an interested side note, I always found this interesting. Our first law enforcement data access request report was called Law Enforcement Data Access Report and not Transparency Report, and had a footnote that it did not include those FISA requests, which we eventually have received because we could not even say whether we have received them or not. And so we do not stand on the one side and our customers or users on the other. So where governments access illegally data that we hold on behalf of our customers, they hack our systems or the data transfer just as any other illegal access. Eventually, that is, in my first statement, why I was saying we have reinforced across our services the need for encryption, so that it is not easy for anybody to do that, be it a government or be it any other illegal access or hacker. The situation for us in rebuilding trust is something that we see global. I do agree that there is just because of the amount of data that comes, that it has a different scale. At the same time, when you look at our data access reports, you can also see that it has actually not affected a huge amount of cases. So I want to say that we have to really look at the specific details, and unfortunately very often on those panels we can actually not specify what part of what part of the equation we are discussing. And the last point on rule of law I want to make is that in reaction to this, starting in developing catch-22 laws, that does not necessarily help. Catch-22 laws, when you are specifying laws, that brings companies in, okay, you either break this law or that law situations. It's not going forward a solution. It might be something that is understandable, but it's not really what a government should do. So we are also asking governments to have that dialogue on the different aspects that need to be solved here. To give you one example, in the Brazil internet law that has been recently adopted, they have refrained from data localization requirements, but they have enacted an extra jurisdictional data access provision. So the paradigm shift in the world we live in is a challenge to jurisdictional realities of rule of law, and in particular one where most of the international laws were based is in territoriality. So by forcing governments to use MLATs, we will hopefully also bring them to a state where they enhance them and make those procedures better. And that is a role that we are willing to do to rebuild trust.
Thank you. Really valuable to hear the Microsoft perspective. And the last.
I think the question was mainly on the balance, which I would like to come to now. But I would like to first of all point that there's a book which has been written 20 years ago and which I really like, and which is written by Bill Gates, and it's named The Road Ahead. And already in that book 20 years ago, Bill Gates was writing about the necessities, technical necessities to safeguard the rule of law and trust of users in the internet. And these technical capacities which he was writing about never really occurred to be implemented in most of the systems which we have used for the last 20 years. And that's, I think, because perhaps too less politicians have read it, but also because different than with other technologies, like with the car, where it was obvious that it needs a brake, and that if you manipulate the brake, it might be that you're injured or even you lose your life. In this case, obviously, it was possible to just ignore the fact that there's technical incapacities, because the implications were not really visible and nobody really asked, and as I said, politicians obviously didn't really demand anything because perhaps they didn't knew about these technical issues. And so my impression is that what is broken is the application of due process, as it has been said, and the application of standards. That is something which is necessary to know if you talk about the balance today, because it's not only an issue of governments not acting right, but perhaps it's also an issue of legal standards and technical standards not being adjusted to the realities in which we live since quite a long time now. And the problem is that sometimes balancing things or rebalancing things might be more hard than balancing it from the beginning, because quite a lot of people just get used to the balance we just had the years before, although it might be completely wrong. Just to make it once again a bit more concrete, also with the example I started with, here in Germany and in most countries in Europe, public authorities use technical or information systems which they cannot assure that their own laws are applied to, because they don't have the capacities to look into the hardware, the software, the system, the processing systems and processing parameters which are applied. So technically, they tell their citizens that their laws are applied, but even public authorities cannot really assure it. So how should a citizen, how should a user, or even a company be able to assure that basic standards and the rule of law is applied? It's not possible. So to talk about the balance is not only to talk about general values to be balanced out, or trust to be balanced out only in talks. It's first of all talking about, do we have the right system in place and do we apply this system properly? And I think that's what we need to talk all together with very honestly, because otherwise we will not fix it again.
Thank you very much. Indeed, all this requires a very comprehensive, holistic approach, and probably there is no one single answer or one single solution to that. Because we are going to end in like 20 minutes or 20 minutes maximum, I would like to give the opportunity for the people in the room to reflect, ask questions, and be as active as possible. So the gentleman, please introduce yourself and please state whom is the question for. Is it for all the panelists or for one specific person you want to ask?
Thank you for the panel and for the competitive panel and professional panel and for the audience. My name is Kristo Helasvuok. I'm from Finnish Electronic Frontier Foundation. I would like to just give a comment to you that in your efforts when you try to restore the trust, please do not consider that the restoring, going back in the history, but consider the future as a potential what you can do. So it's not only that you need to go back in the time, but please things do change, and it's not always a bad thing, but the future can also be bright and a nice thing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this comment. Please.
Hi, my name is Alva. I work for the news agency Rappli. I have two questions for Mr. Appelbaum. The first one is the asylum for Snowden in Russia finishes in August, and I would like to know if you could comment on his plans, if you know them. And the second question is the German delegation is planning to meet Snowden in Moscow, and I would like to know if you could comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's take one more question and then... Yes. Oh, okay, sorry.
I also have a question.
To the panel.
Yeah, to the panel.
Okay, let's take this one and then, please.
Johannes Ahlefeld, political advisor to the German Social Democrats in Parliament. What do you expect the erosion of trust in the internet going to mean? Or how are we going to deal with this? Is it going to mean that we're going to face a balkanization or decentralization of the net in the future? Or are we going to go, or should we go, for a new kind of global regulation or regulation of the global commons in terms of the internet? What's the path ahead?
Thank you very much. And let's pick one question.
Carsten Schiefner, taxpayer. So this is actually a request for comment to the entire panel. We've heard a bit about encryption, and I guess you, Cornelia, mentioned encryption in particular. I just wondered to what extent encryption is useful to tackle the issue we have at hand right now. Because I strongly wonder if agencies would eventually say, if everybody would use strong encryption across the board, would eventually say, well, no, we can't, spy on you any longer because everything is encrypted. My idea would be that they would go to the government and say, like, well, we need an increased budget to, still be able to decrypt encrypted communication. So essentially, eventually, I'm going to pay for my own, for the decryption of my own messages, essentially. So I just wonder how we should tackle this dilemma. And I guess it's not going to be tackled by, increased encryption or by the use of, the increased use of stronger encryption. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 3 points or 3 questions, one related to Snowden. Would you like to? Yes. And please, number 4.
Okay, so my question to you, Microsoft, is kind of a strange one, but I have a friend, his name is Casper Bowden. He's a really great guy. He's one of the best people to ever work at Microsoft. And he was basically fired for doing the legal analysis that predicted that things like PRISM and FISA would exist. And so when I think about rebuilding trust, I wonder if Microsoft is going to bring Casper back to clean house, and specifically, if you guys are going to re-architect Skype to be peer-to-peer again and end-to-end encrypted with an open protocol that we can verify with free or at least verifiable source code, so we can begin to trust Microsoft again, because you did re-architect it for PRISM. And so my question is, ultimately, is Microsoft going to leave the PRISM program and programs like it and build software that makes programs like it impossible for Microsoft to betray their users? That's my question to Microsoft.
Thank you.
Sorry for that.
Corina, do you want to take it? Do you want to respond now?
To do this first, so
okay.
I would not be sitting here if I were not okay with having those more difficult questions. And I would like to make the note that Sophie, who talked me into this, is not here. I don't know why. But she also told me that there were a number of other companies who declined. So take it as something positive. So on Casper, I have been working with Casper at the time. He was, when I started at Microsoft, and I remember still talking to Gus Hussein from International Privacy that I should, coming from a civil society organization into Microsoft, Gus gave me the advice that he's a good guy and you should be talking to him, and I have been talking to him quite a bit. So Casper and I hope still are on good terms, and I cannot possibly comment for the reason that he has left Microsoft. I simply do not know the exact details, and so this is a question I'm afraid I cannot answer. I think to the other things, leaving PRISM, we have heard PRISM, the existence of a PRISM program under NSA the first time than everybody else, with the revelation in The Guardian.
Does that mean just the name PRISM was what you learned? Because you said you protected information in transit.
Can you use the mic?
Goes around data and storage.
So here's the thing. What I can say to it is that apparently there has been requests, and if you look at the documents that you can see, there has been names stroken out of it, but it kept a LCA piece which identifies Microsoft, where this company has declined to work with the NSA on anything. What we have so far done is we have sued the government and then asked for being able to showcase the numbers of requests we have received. We can even say now that in a certain number of time, we have a certain percentage of national security orders in comparison to law enforcement requests, and we can also say that none of those have actually impacted European business customers. And so just by claiming things, it doesn't make it right. When we have, and that is, and there has been over the last 12 years really step by step, and I'm not saying that Microsoft on June 2013 said, and now we are doing this, and this, and this, and this. But there is an evolvement, discussion, it's lengthy discussions internally. We have started, first of all, with the transparency. That was like one of the first steps. When then the revelation continued, and we heard that, and there was actually Google Transit. the PowerPoint slide which was revealed was on transit of Google and Yahoo. And that triggered us, let's go do encrypt there, reinforce mechanisms there. And then we have looked at the transporter access part of visa and have looked at whether this would actually, whether we could actually challenge those when they reached customer data which is stored outside of the United States. So to give assurance in our contracts for European business customers who would like to have that assurance that we would actually go against such a such an order. We are doing this currently in a different area. We are doing this currently in a normal law enforcement procedure with a warrant that has been issued by a New York District Court case. And here we have last Friday submitted our response and our challenge, and we have also done the additional step to go to EU governments to help us with amicus brief. We have one of the key negotiators of the MLET between Ireland and the United States that has negotiated that procedure to help us with an amicus brief. We have US companies, we have civil society in the United States that are filing amicus brief to help us doing that. So we are doing all these steps. And I want to go back to the taxpayer. I'm very sensitive to that, certainly because I live in Belgium. The encryption and I think to certain extent I understand the comment. Security is a process, so any step you do will have to enhance and it depends probably on your own government's ability and eagerness to do those kind of accesses. So it is again a government issue to help them behave under the rule of law, and I'm turning to policymakers in that respect, where I think we as Microsoft are simply on the same page and in the same boat. It doesn't help to think that we are the adversary here. I think we're simply trying to do what our customers want us to do.
Thank you, Corina. To the encryption, decryption related question, is anyone else who wants to pick up on that? Mm-hmm.
Encryption works. As far as I can tell from the things that I have seen working on the Snowden leaks, I'm one of the people that's been breaking the news. That's why I know Microsoft was owned by the NSA inside and out. Every time a company chooses to allow for lawful interception, or so-called lawful interception, they have built a backdoor that can be exploited by people that do not care about the lawfulness of that backdoor or that weakness. So crypto is one of the very few things that will help. And fundamentally, from what we can tell, factoring with a reasonably sized key, that is to say, not 1024-bit RSA or something like this, something much larger. 4096-bit seems pretty safe right now. Factoring and discrete log are hard. And what that means, and I really believe that, right? In fact, my entire life right now and all the things I do are predicated on certain mathematical problems being hard. And I probably would not be free sitting here if it were not for mathematics. So I really put my money where my mouth is in this case. And so when companies do not re-architect to make peer-to-peer end-to-end encrypted solutions, we should not trust them. And no amount of money from the government is going to decrypt that. They're going to break into your house, they're going to break into your computer by exploiting it, and what we should do is raise it from passive to active. We should make them, instead of getting it for free or going to a company to coerce them, we should make sure that they actually have to do an attack that can be detected, which may allow, for example, bringing it to a court. And that will cost money, of course. But the important part is that the crypto is not the weakest link. It's fundamentally the architecture. And the mathematics, as far as I know, they're not bad. I've seen time and time again interceptions that there's a person who's targeted for surveillance, even by the NSA, and they're using off-the-record messaging, and the NSA says, sorry, we can't break that, it's off the record. And that, to me, gives me great hope that policy and technology can meet in the middle. And when companies don't make that move to meet in the middle, we should not trust them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else wants to reflect on this last question of encryption, decryption, or we go to fragmentation, balkanization?
There was this question of balkanization in the internet and so on. This term of balkanization is, of course, often linked with the cloud discussion as well, and especially that what some member states in the European Union especially said, also the Chancellor of this wonderful country here in Germany said that we need European solutions or European storage of data. That's, for example, not the position of the Austrian government. For the Austrian government, this kind of fragmentation or that doing a fence around the internet is not the correct way. We also think that especially the safe environment in the way of encryption and so on are the solutions we have to work on. I mean, what the Austrian government especially is working on, and where one of the few things where my government was really on the lead, is the question on working in the trustful EID, which is accepted everywhere in Europe for services. So this is one of the aspects. But the whole thing, the question was also in which direction is it going with trust and so on. And I think it's nothing new when I say that. I think I just quote even Nelly Cruz or whoever who said, well, the whole story of PRISM was really a terrible shock, wake-up call. And the answer of governments in a democratic society can only be one thing: transparency, transparency, transparency. That means really rethinking, for example, how is the legal framework as regards access to information. Actually, we are heavily discussing in Austria to introduce a new Freedom of Information Act, and stakeholders are not satisfied so far with the draft. Authorities, to my mind, are still too much troubled about the questions they could get. But it's really this access to information, this transparency, that must be the answer of the state. And then really what I just want to repeat, trust is directly linked to the concept of human rights. If people can't trust, for example, in effective remedies, if people can't trust in the institutions, if they can't trust also in a professional legal framework, then trust is a concept of theory. And last word, because I'm also working a lot in legislation. It's completely right what was said here, that the legislator has a big problem. He's always behind all these developments. And therefore, I was, from the very beginning, quite supporting this idea of multi-stakeholderism in the way of legislators should really listen to that, what is going on in this process, and should make use of that, of the various voices. It's no chance for legislators if laws exclude the voices of the stakeholders, and therefore, from the principle here, I think there will be also, must also be a change how legislation is done in the future.
And there is a lot of work that's been going on in countries around Europe, Matthias, exactly on this issue, how to build, how to institutionalize processes related to rethinking the design and the new way of co-creating and co-designing policies together with all stakeholders. I see a remote participation question. Surina?
Thank you. We have both comments and questions, so I will start with the comments.
Very quickly, please.
Yeah. I trust the internet to be entirely human, meaning less than trustworthy. Trust to me is the ability to have the integrity expectations of my interactions in life met and to have some control over that. And now two questions. Do the panel believe that national laws cannot discriminate a right to privacy solely by nationality of the target and still be consistent with human rights? And the second one, Would the panel support the idea of stronger standards for greater transparency in terms of making privacy practices clearer to users, not just written in long terminology that hides more than it reveals? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Serena.
Yeah, I would like to answer both of them because I think both questions are very valid and also connected to this question before on the territoriality. Because, for example, in Europe, we have constitutions and laws, and all of them say the right to data protection is a human right. The constitution of this country, by the way, gets 60 this year, and it's also in there. It's a human right. It comes from the human right to dignity and the human right to personality here. On the European level, it's even written down very clearly, data protection is a human right for everybody. So in Europe, at least in the European Union, it would not be lawful or constitutional to distinguish protection to personal data along the lines of nationality. And that's exactly what I see is also the solution. If we would at least enforce that very clearly in the territoriality of the European Union and all its institutions and all companies or actors coming to the European Union's market, then we would already be quite far, because that's the biggest market on the world and it's a quite strong player. 28 member states of the European Union, quite strong in the international community, which, by the way, also referring to the question from the previous round, is dominated by a majority of non-democratic repressive states. So just to imagine that in a few years we would just create global standards and enforce them equally in due process is a bit blunt, and I would say that first of all we should just enforce the laws and the constitutions which apply on our territories, and that's what we need to do. And that's the second question, which I think refers very clearly not only to transparency, but I think that transparency is one of the most important issues here, because obviously we are not even aware of many things, and as consumers, which are also the suspects of lawsuits, we need to first of all know that our rights are infringed before we go to court and before we can enforce our own rights. So without transparency, there's quite a loophole in the system of rule of law. So we need, of course, to have better rules on transparency with regard to our privacy rights. But they are already there, they could be improved, but also there, it's a lack of enforcement. We have a huge lack of enforcement. For example, in our legal framework here in the European Union, we have 28 different national laws which are frameworked by, on the one side, the Council of Europe Convention, on the other side, a directive of the European Union. And all of them are so different and so weak in enforcement that since, I would say, 2 decades, so since the existence of the directive, it's very hardly enforced. So what we need is to get due processes, which work and where citizens and consumers can insist on the application of their rights, and where it would be sanctioned if authorities or companies infringe these rights. And that's the problem of today. It's taking place all the time. I can tell you hundreds of examples which I experienced myself, and I would say that in the area of right to privacy, right to data protection, at the moment we have a lack of enforcement of about 80 to 90%, and that's not what I would say is something which I could trust on.
Thank you very much. We are really running out of time, and there are 2 more people standing here. Very quickly, 1 minute maximum to formulate your question or your reflection, and please introduce yourselves and say who is the question addressed to.
I was afraid you would say that about the 1 minute. My name is Stefan Herwig. I'm an internet analyst, but I'm also civil society. I would like to go back to the actual title of the panel and second something that Matthias said about, is the internet broken? I don't think it's the internet is broken. The technical layer is working exceptionally well. The host provider layer is working economically extremely well. Google and Apple have just become the most valuable brands after and have, how can I say, exceeded Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was the most valuable brand for 20 years, and Google and Apple last year have become the most valuable brands, now have overtaken Coca-Cola by a long shot. What's not working is the regulatory level. John Perry Barlow, you have been so wrong. You've been proven wrong that we can sustain the internet with a minimal regulatory level. And I think I would like to say so much more, but since I only have that 1 minute, I would like to say this regulatory level has never worked. So what is broken is the vision of the internet that we have developed 10, 20 years ago. We should now re-envision this societal domain.
Thank you very much. Please, 1 minute maximum.
Yes, good evening. My name is Birgit Kolbe and I'm working at the International Center for New Media in Austria. And my boss, Professor Peter Brook, called an initiative into life which is called My Data Belongs to Me. In a nutshell, it is the switch of paradigms. So the issue is not protection, but rights, not safeguarding, but property and ownership. So if the people whose behavior the data originates are the owners, they also have to own the property rights and the power to decide on the data, including the right to alter, to amend, and also to exclude others from doing these things. And of course, this approach should also be reflected in the technical infrastructure. So I would like to invite the panel to comment on this new approach to My Data Belongs to Me, and invite the audience to get involved in this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we could spend a couple of more days here in this room and we won't, exhaust all the questions and all the reflections. Because we don't have that much time anymore, I would like to ask the panelists to have their last 1 minute reflections based on the questions that have just been addressed. Please.
Let me say, every time I am in a session or a panel like this, the problem seems more overwhelming. So let me attempt to make an asset out of a liability. I said at the beginning I thought the definition of trust was the transparent rule of law consistently applied. And I'll amend that to say it's the transparency of law consistently applied, adequate to control the power wielded by public and private authority. Our problem right now is not that we have no structure, it's not that we have no law, no principles, it's not that we have no sufficient secure technologies, it's that they are not adequate. And that adequacy problem is revealed in 100 different places, and we've talked about dozens of them today. Corporate accountability, secret laws, public debate, crypto wars, the breakages that we see in the security in our own machines. All of these can be seen together as an overwhelming problem, or we can pick them apart and say that we didn't get into this mess overnight and it wasn't one thing that got us here, it was many, and it will be many things fixed that gets us where we want to go. So each of us with our own skills and our own interests can take the problem most suited to us and work on it diligently. Because it's not all or nothing. We can begin incrementally to repair what is broken and to restore trust, and each of us will have a role to play in that, whether it's political, technical, social, journalistic, scientific, pick your poison.
Nothing new to say when I repeat that trust is something all stakeholders have, of course, to work about. The state's role as such is really to deliver this, what the European Court of Human Rights has called this favorable environment for human rights, that you can communicate both public and private without fear. And one thing I really also want to say is it's one of the big issues that users and people really get the chance to understand their rights in a much better way than this is done today. It's a catastrophe how, for example, the human rights aspect is covered in schools. The so-called average citizen has not really an idea of the most basic things like, okay, when an authority wants to intervene, they need a law, this law needs a legitimate aim, but the main thing is nobody talks about the proportionality. And the whole prison thing was not only because there was just pretended to have a legitimate ultimate aim. It was also this question of complete misuse of proportionality. And these are the things we really should talk about, how to bring this back to the schools, because this is one of the basic things people should really have a right to learn. Thank you. And the Council of Europe is hard working on that with the user handbook. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these comments. And I think we didn't cover the question on Snowden, the one that was asked by the lady. If you could, in your last minute of reflections, quickly update us on the...
Make some news?
Now you get a headline.
I mean, I think it's important to talk about Snowden. I've got a little Snowden head here, symbolizing him sitting here. And I think it's important to note that we've heard a lot from people on this panel about accountability, about human rights, about all that lip service that we hear from people all the time. And no one on this panel or in Europe has really helped him to get here. No one is looking to have him, for example, really solidly, I mean, Jan, a little bit actually, but he can only do so much because of the European Parliament's actual legal powers. But no one has really talked about getting Snowden here and protecting him, his basic human rights. And so this question of what about Snowden in Russia? Well, you know, it's an open question. It seems quite clear to me that if Germany steps up, that might actually happen. Snowden might have asylum here, and that should happen. It's quite clear that it should. I actually went to the Austrian Parliament and I asked, and I've asked several different parliaments, including the Council of Europe, people in the Council of Europe and people in the European Parliament, and all of them have said that they are afraid of the United States government and they could not keep Snowden safe if he were to set foot here. And so I think the question is whether or not people want to. For example, I asked Neelie Kroes, why don't you help Snowden? And she says, what would we gain by doing that? What more do we need to learn? That is not the reason we take a moral action. We take a moral action because it is the right thing to do, not because of a capitalist conception of benefit, right? We save a young man's life. So to that end, the question about data protection is really straightforward. It's not about data protection, it's about people protection. So we can apply a very simple test and we can say when it is the case that the people are not protected or secret services get to use a loophole in the constitutions that protect our privacy, we should know that we need to change those things in service of fighting for the user. And so obviously things like giving Snowden asylum are important, but we should actually work to stop the spying. I mean, the new BND office that's being built here in Berlin is gigantic, it's unbelievable. What do we suppose that they're going to do? They're spies that work with the NSA to spy on all of us. The BND and the NSA are best friends. So if we want to talk about privacy and human rights, we have to start to dismantle the institutions that are outside of the rule of law or that do not respect the fundamental spirit of those laws.
Thank you very much, Corina. Corina, maximum 1 minute.
Yes, so I have already given quite some of the examples and how Microsoft has reacted to the revelations and how we have tried to step forward in restoring trust by certain steps. I want to basically use the time to go back to this question on who owns your data, and that's quite straightforward for Microsoft because in our privacy policies we make this very clear. The customer owns his data, and that is not always clear, and it's not always in all privacy policies of all companies a choice to make of the customer whom to trust in that respect. We do interesting research in that area in how to actually architect around those controls in order to have customers being able to more granularly define what data uses they might agree to and what data uses they might not agree to. And there's a lot of stuff undergoing, so I'm happy to connect back to the person who was raising this topic.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, perhaps I would like to first of all get to that question because I don't think that the concept is pointing at the problem of us citizens at the moment or on the rule of law question. It's a question which perhaps in addition is also does make sense with regard to the rights of the consumer or the role of the consumer in this data economy which is building. So in how far I can also somehow say under which conditions I give my data for specific reasons. But it's not really sufficient to talk about that, because as we have already heard, it's not only about protecting any data or having rights on economic issues, but it's also about human dignity. It's the right to be left alone, the right to privacy, or the right to my own personality, or how the German Constitutional Court 30 years ago said it, it's about the right to my informational self-determination. Which I like, but which is not really perhaps a nice word. So it's about really the question: how do we protect human rights? How do we protect the humans in the information technology and in our lives, in the general environment in which we live? And there, I think it's really about the question if the rules which we gave us as society are somehow in place, if they really are respected. And I have to say, at the moment, our biggest problem is that they are not respected. And that we therefore need to get out and get this done again, get politicians to do the right decision. And for example, with Snowden, that's not very easy, because you, in a democracy, in most of the situations, need a majority. Until now, obviously, there's not a majority there for getting the rules applied again, and obviously we will only get that majority if there's a majority outside calling for that to happen. So to perhaps finalize this round, that might be a conclusion, to get out and get people on this issue, because it's about very fundamental issues and not only about the internet like we knew it perhaps 20 years ago, being some technique which you could use or not use, but it's about everyone's life, every day, every hour, every second.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for the great questions, and the panelists for the excellent contributions, and several ideas that I'm sure everyone in the room is going to reflect on after this session. We have Lee Hibbard. Lee, I think you've got 2 minutes for your brief report on the session. Could you please come on the stage, or shall we bring the microphone to you?
It's a very difficult task summarising that panel, by the way. Thank you very much, guys. It was very good. I've really got about three, or let me just say five bullets more or less. I hope this encapsulates some of the clapping and some of the major issues you mentioned. I mean, quite clearly, in my opinion, the question of transparent application of the rule of law and due process safeguards is key. That's something which I think you all said, but you can all agree upon. Therefore, making governments and businesses accountable for their actions, activities, particularly vis-à-vis national security issues, I think is key and has been a driver throughout the discussion. That is said because you've been saying that the regulatory level, the regulation is broken, lack of enforcement, there's lack of respect for rules, questioning the question of democratic oversight, and that there's a need to dismantle institutions that don't respect the rule of law and work outside the rule of law. That's the first bullet. The second bullet would be about, I think, what I took away was that getting businesses to be more transparent and more accountable, getting companies to meet in the middle with the user and maybe with other actors. You know, there's a push, and people were clapping with regard to some of the issues regarding pushing back at Microsoft. And I think it's quite clear that, you know, more transparency and more accountability of companies is key. We heard today about transparency reporting and how accurate then and what is reflected in those reports. I think that's key. That's the second bullet. The third bullet would be about giving control back to users, in particular using encryption. You said about the need to know about rights, the insistence on rights, including, I think, the right not to trust companies. So, I mean, I'm not talking about a human right, but the right not to say no, I don't believe that. And then you went on to talk about how to enforce those rights, in a particular privacy-enhancing technologies that you sort of hinted at, you referred to. And of course, better transparency. I think the fifth bullet and the fourth and maybe final bullet is about the moral aspect that you mentioned, more moral action to protect people. Leading by example. You mentioned Snowden, but I guess it could apply to other people who are considered whistleblowers or human rights defenders. And in that context, there's a need to mobilize the action of more people, basically. Maybe people are not aware enough. We need to mobilize them more to do more, to get X to come to country Y. And I think that's something which came through quite strongly. So those are my 4 bullets, which I hope encapsulate the major conversations you've had today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee, very much. And thank you, the panelists. And I would like to end up this session. And before giving the floor to Wolf for some housekeeping announcements, I would like to end by quoting Tim Berners-Lee, who just shared in one of the recent interviews for The Guardian the following: "Unless we have an open, neutral internet we can rely on, without worrying about what's happening at the back of the door, we can't have an open government, good democracy, good healthcare, connected communities, and diversity of culture. It's not naive to think we can have that, but it is naive to think we can just sit back and get it." Thank you very much. Wolf, the floor is yours, and I think our panelists deserve a huge hand of applause.
Thanks, Veronica, for this last session, and my thanks also goes to the panelists. I have some last housekeeping announcements to make. We have to leave this building 7:30 latest, because security is only paid until 10. We will have an incredible mess if we are not out at 7:30 latest. And you may recall, there is a social evening tonight, which is not here, which is another part of Berlin. Outside you will find this nice little brochure where you find the description of the location where we meet. In another part, it's roughly said close to underground station Friedrichstraße, where is a Landesvertretung of Saxonia-Anhalt, where we have the social evening. You may be aware that tomorrow EuroDIG will continue. You are invited for the first side event starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, not in this room, but in the Stresemann room, a side room, one of the workshop rooms here. They will start at 8 sharp. Then we will continue with another keynote at 9 o'clock here. And then after the keynote with our next plenary session 4, which is an economy session. So try to be here tomorrow morning again right in time, and contribute as today, and you are all invited for the social evening now. As I said, any further instructions for the venue you will find in this brochure. Thanks, and see you later.